We've yet to see the very best from developer Techland's latest open-world zombie survival effort, Dying Light the Beast. Powered by its C-engine technology, the gruesome dismemberment physics return alongside a robust world streaming system that services a parkour moveset. Looking at PlayStation 5, PS5 Pro, Series X and S today though, the Beast is missing a key feature at launch in the form of ray tracing support. Techland has promised RT features will be re-added via a patch in the future to PC. As for console, there's no absolute confirmation on RT features as yet, but for reference, Dying Light 2 on PS5 and Series X featured RT shadows in a quality mode. In fact, PS5 Pro was updated in November 2024 to include 4 modes, with ray traced shadows again being the standout feature on that quality option. What we have today in the follow-up, Dying Light the Beast, is something of a step backwards for now. There are just 2 options on PS5, Pro and Series X. A 30fps quality mode with no ray traced shadows included this time around, and a 60fps performance mode. Though on that note, just as with Dying Light 2, the performance mode here once again allows us to unlock to 120fps if you have a 120Hz VRR display connected. So for now, how does Techland push each console in its current state, and what about the game's PS5 Pro enhancements? Let's find out. Once again, the Beast is a cross-platform project which should set expectations for the visual bar it's reaching for. A PS4 and Xbox One release is penciled in for later this year, and while the limits of those systems are factored into its design in some respects, notably the rather simple terrain geometry, the newer consoles do have scope to embellish the visuals and run at higher frame rates. Putting Series S aside for the moment, no console really misses out of the big 3 here. In the performance mode, PS5, Pro and Series X offer identical settings, with shadow and geometry detail streaming in at the exact same point around this opening woodland area. Textures, shadows, and effects are unchanged too. The only unusual outlier is that Series X runs with no, or at least very limited, screen space reflections. Note that there's no SSR across these glossy lab floors, and the reflections too are missing on the metals of these vents at the side. In the open world, it's also clear that there's an SSR difference between PlayStation and Xbox systems, where a lack of coverage for the environment means less detailed reflections in rivers and puddles on Series X. All we have instead is the C-engine's fallback method on Xbox, which creates an approximate though less complete mirror image on its own. The bigger comparison point relates to resolution. Running the performance mode on a 60Hz display, in this case, PS5 and Series X render at a dynamic 1080p, while PS5 Pro increases that target to 1512p. Put in a practical example, in a matching frame as we crawl those lab floors, all 3 consoles hit those maximum bounds comfortably. Next along, a later corridor filled with zombies shows PS5 Pro taking a dip to 1282p, while the other machines still hold firm at 1080p. And in a final example, emerging outdoors pushes all 3 to lower readings of 972p on PS5 and Series X, while PS5 Pro rests at 1260p. It's a relative image quality advantage then for Pro users above all else. Switching over to the 30fps quality mode meanwhile, most settings are intact from the performance mode, though with slightly improved shadow and foliage draw, while pixel counts also get an increase as you might expect. The zombie corridor now comes in at 1838p on Series X, 1728p on base PS5, and a full-fat native 4K on PS5 Pro. Much of the lab tutorial area hits 4K on Pro here, which is a good result. While emerging to the more complex outdoors area, this drops to 1620p apiece on Series X and PS5, with Pro also dropping in step to 1944p. Jumping to the frame rate testing next, all consoles here are comfortably on target, at 60fps or 30fps depending on the mode. But it's the performance mode at 120fps that's perhaps most interesting. To be clear, you will need a 120Hz VRR compatible display to truly unlock the frame rate to 120 FPS. Without that VRR part engaged, you'll just get a 60 FPS cap. It's similar in this way to what we saw in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Dragon's Dogma 2, and makes sense given that the frame rate is wavering up and down the graph in a manner that only VRR will be able to interpret and turn into a perceptually smooth result. In practice, all readings in the Beast come in at a similar 64 to 65 FPS reading for much of this extended outdoors route. Thanks to Rich for putting this sequence together, 60 FPS appears to be the threshold around which DRS works, and so any sign of a dip under 65 triggers a drop to a lower resolution in order to sustain that figure. It's also worth noting that Series X enjoys a marginal lead on average compared to PS5 and Pro, with jumps to around 70 FPS while outdoors here. Put in terms of raw stats, across the entire run, Series X ends up averaging at 66.4 frames per second, base PS5 at 64.8 FPS, and Pro at the lowest average of 64.2 FPS. A surprising result, perhaps, but reasonably explained by PS5 Pro having that more ambitious upper DRS bounds of 1512p. Our next test takes us back to that lab interior, where an unlocked 120 FPS has all consoles strike higher readings this time. Brawling with a horde of zombies puts both PS5 and Series X at around 85 FPS, allowing for much more frame data for VR to work with, and again, PS5 Pro languishes with a high 70s reading. Interior areas will give you your best shot of rising above 60 FPS then, even in facing multiple enemies, but it clearly depends heavily on VRR support being in place. At least looking at the performance mode on a 60Hz display, no console is really at any high risk of going below that 60 FPS line. On PS5, Pro and Series X, the only real blip I've encountered at 60 occurs when making sudden camera movements. We've seen this countless times in Assassin's Creed and Elden Ring as well. Forcing a rapid change in GPU load takes the dynamic resolution scaling system off guard, even for a split second, resulting in a flash of screen tearing. None of these consoles are immune, and so the Reaper fight in the church courtyard shows brief traces of tearing, as do cutscene camera changes. It's a minor distraction all told, and an exception to an otherwise robust 60 FPS reading on all three consoles. Likewise, the 30 FPS quality mode follows the same trend. It's absolutely rock solid on PS5, PS5 Pro and Series X, with screen tearing and a minor frame time drop possible during camera changes. You might also catch tearing during the parkour action as well, where looking directly up to scale walls and then down again is pretty commonplace, but that's the extent of the issue for each. The final question then, what about Xbox Series S? Just as with Dying Light 2, Series S is built with only 30 FPS play in mind, which right away excludes it from that 120Hz option. In short, that 30 FPS line is at least well held. Brief bouts of tearing are more common than Series X, where the camera movement gets too aggressive, but generally it is a stable readout. I've had no major drops or world streaming hitches either, so on that level at least, the C engine is scaling well to Series S's more limited GPU and memory resources. This is of course achieved with a few visual cutbacks. Series S runs at a dynamic 1080p with drops to 864p lowest, so quite similar to the setup of the performance mode on the other consoles. Next to Series X's quality mode, a hit to image quality is evident in close zooms, but it's otherwise very comparable settings-wise. Geometry and shadow LEDs are identical as we run forward, as is the up-close quality of character shadows. The only notable cutback is in some select textures. Typically, it's also the more gory stuff, like blood splatter on walls, and even the innards of zombies present at a lower resolution. For the rest of the package though, Series S is easily pulling its weight with comparable settings, though at 30 FPS. That's the state of Dying Light the Beast right now on console. It'll be interesting to see if Techland use the Beast as an opportunity to experiment with RT features more on console, or at the very least, if we'll get parity with Dying Light 2's modes and options. The team, after all, has promised to use Pro hardware to the fullest extent in previous interviews, But as it appears today, a resolution boost is really the best it has to offer. The boost to 4K is obviously a nice bonus, but it does seem lacking, especially knowing the team has offered more options with these machines in the last game. For now though, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. If you did enjoy this quick look at the beast, do feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. Check out our Patreon to support Digital Foundry's work, and of course to get in touch directly, you know where to find us. But from me for now, thanks for watching.